There's going to be a demo below on how to attach various aggregates, but I wanted to talk about it in the video first just to kind of give you an idea of what's going on. And I wanted to include this video before we even start thinking about aggregates because I think it's easier to imagine what you would do with the material once you know what you can potentially do with the material. So once you see the aggregate, think about how you can possibly attach it or incorporate it into your form. There are several ways of how you can attach it to the surface, and slip is my favorite. It's the easiest, it's the most accessible. You can just use the slip of the same clay body that you're normally using. You can mix it with some other kind of slips. You can layer them up. You kind of just work out the perfect way for you to attach them. And normally, the more slip, the better the attachment. So if some things fall off, it's probably going to be not enough slip, or potentially the slip added to some inappropriate clay stage. For example, if you're adding slip to the dry form, it's more likely to fall off than if you're adding slip to the wet form and then attaching the attachments, whatever those attachments are. The other way to incorporate those aggregates is to wedge those aggregates into the clay body. There's a bit less of a range of things you can do it with because some of the things that are too big or expand too quickly or maybe wet, they're not going to be as practical as if you just attach them to the surface. So surface is less demanding than mixing them into the clay body. So you could wedge them in just the regular way, or you could also sandwich wedge them, which I'll show you in the demo later. You can also use the rolling pin and just like roll those aggregates into the slab if you're using slabs, or you can slap the slab against those attachments, implement and incorporate them this way. I'm also going to show it in the demo. There are other things though and other ideas that I'd like to talk about on how you can attach those various aggregates in a better way. Those are the ideas that I haven't really used that much, but I know that they work for other people and they might work for you. So some people I know are using glue, and in particular Elmer's glue, to attach the ingredients. This will work if the aggregate that you're touching is melting at least a little bit during the firing. Of course, clay kind of melts a tiny bit, if I can phrase it this way. So it's possible the aggregate will be attached even if the aggregate itself is not melting, but it's less likely. So really, you have to test it. It depends on the aggregate, depends on what exactly you're touching. The glue will burn away, but the attachment hopefully will stay attached. So it's something to give a try, and maybe it will work, maybe it wouldn't. The only place where I used glue was with one of the hard glazes. It was a glaze that didn't melt much, so it was like little balls of glazes. That was super fun, but it melted a little bit, so it managed to attach to the surface. The other similar technique to this is adjust the chemistry of the slip to make it melt a little bit more, the lower temperature. And we will talk about the overall idea behind how to do that in part 2 of the course. So if you're not taking part 2 and you want to learn that, make sure that you upgrade your plan to part 2. If you are taking part 2 and the glazing part, you will learn about it later. Some people make it a bit easier, and maybe that's the option for you if you don't want to dive into the glaze chemistry. Some people just take a little bit of a glaze, like transparent glaze, and mix it with the slip. So in theory, it's supposed to flux it out a little bit more and make things more attachable. I also use glaze as the adhesive. What I do, I take the bisque form and I pour the glaze on top of the bisque form, and then I very quickly attach the things before the glaze dries. It's not a very practical thing to do, but that's also an option. As long as the attachments and additives are glued onto the surface while you're doing it, then the glaze is going to melt in the firing and the aggregates are going to stick to the surface anyway. So that's actually another way of how you can attach aggregates you could glue them on top of the glaze, and then because glaze is going to melt, the aggregates are also going to be glued on top of the object. Some people also slip cast, and if you slip cast, I think it's a lot easier. You can just mix your slip with all those aggregates and then just slip cast, see what happens. I've never done it, so I can't say much, but I know that the artist who I showed you recently in the very beginning of the first lecture, she slip casts her forms and she just mixes her slip with all those different aggregates to create very interesting texture. That's it. So let's actually watch the demo on how I incorporate those aggregates using slip and wedging them in.